Now you're going.
Hello! Welcome to the camera hardware overview. Say hi to Harry Potter. He will be joining us for this segment. So we have our camera lens here on the front. So every lens has two dials on them. One is zoom and one is focus. On some cameras they're swapped and they're the other direction, but yep, zoom and focus. And then on some of our cameras, there's also this adapter piece here, and it has a manual exposure on it. So if you're having trouble getting your shot dark enough or bright enough, it's most likely that this has been bumped away from its standard setting, which is like 4. So that's something that is good to keep in mind if you're having problems with your exposure. Next is focus assist. So, actually, let's do here next. So, right on the front of the camera, you'll see a bunch of buttons here at the top. So, we have shortcuts here for adjusting certain camera settings. So, you can see here if I turn it the right direction, we have ISO on the left. ISO is our exposure. And white balance on the right, which is kind of the warmth and coolness of the shot. And then the middle one, I don't know what that does. We don't use it. We only use the left and the right one. And then what you do is you use those as a shortcut to bring up that setting. And then to adjust the setting degree, you use this little dial here on the front handle. So let me show you what that looks like. So on screen, when you press the ISO shortcut, you'll see a little dial come up. You move the dial, it changes the setting. Press the white balance shortcut, same thing. So the record button here, we don't make recordings typically during our services, but you do need it for one thing, and that is if you accidentally press the playback button here instead of the menu button. If you press the playback button, there's no way to get from what is now showing recordings on your screen. There's no way to get from there back to the main filming screen without pressing the record button. So you just press that button if you accidentally go to the playback screen, and it will take you back to your live camera shot. All right, last is the shortcut function buttons here. So there's only one we regularly use, but you need to know what the other two do. The left one here, let's see what that does. So that applies like a heat exposure test, which we don't use. So if your camera looks all weird like that, press that button to turn it back off. There's also a setting for applying our camera's LUT, which is kind of the like coloring and contrast, the overall look. So you'll see what it looks like if I turn that off. It loses its good look here, and it looks all gray and weird. If your camera looks weird like that, it's because you turned your LUT off. Just press that shortcut button to turn it back on. So the third one is the only one that you'll actively use, and this one is a focus assist, and what it does is it shows focus peaking. So if we can get a good shot here, you'll be able to see Harry Potter. When he comes into focus, it shows these little tiny red lines around his glasses and his hair. So that's it's kind of like a helpful visual to show you what's in focus. That can be most helpful when you're trying to do refined focusing, or you're quickly changing focus between multiple subjects. All right, so some of the last things to know about the camera software side of things here are the, let's talk about resolution. So these are 4K cameras, and you can see here when I'm zoomed out all the way, the shot looks this wide, but we can change our resolution. So what it does is it basically crops in a smaller resolution shot from this same lens, but because we only broadcast in 1080, we can still use that resolution just fine. So I'll show you here. If I press menu, the menu button there, and go to our record tab, this is where we adjust our resolutions. So on most of our cameras, the only two we switch between are Ultra HD and the one right below it, which is HD. So this is 4K and 1080. So when I switch away from Ultra HD to just HD and go back to our camera view, you'll see it's much closer now, which means we can also get a much closer zoom shot than we could on the 4K setting. So that's adjusting the resolution. So the other things to be aware of in the software settings here, the top left is showing our frame rate. So it's 2997 right now. If you're seeing an image here, but our broadcast director is saying that they're not getting your signal, this is something to check. If it's not set to 2997 and it's down at 25 or up higher, it won't show up on our switcher because it needs to come in at the right frame rate. So 2997 is our frame rate setting. Great, so the other two settings you want to know about here are the ISO and the white balance. So we already talked about the shortcut buttons for those settings up here, but these are the on-screen ways to access them. So you just tap ISO and then that little adjustment comes up. You can drag it or use the arrow for finer adjustments. Same thing for the white balance. And then another thing to know about your screen here is you can hide the information, which is called like the heads up display, by just swiping up and down. If you want it to show up again, swipe up and down again. And then lastly, you can do a zoom preview. So this lets you zoom to see more in detail about what's in focus or something that's in your shot without you zooming the output that you're sending to the shot. So it's just for you here at the camera to check zoom. You just double tap and it shows that little zoom window up in the top left, and then double tap again. If you're confused why the camera operator or why the director is telling you to go somewhere really weird, it's probably because you're accidentally zoomed in here and you haven't noticed. So that's all that you need to know about the camera software.